Good morning, LeDerick.
Good morning, Michelle. How are you?
I'm awesome. I'm so excited that you're here. You are like a ray of sunshine. I'm so grateful that Koshi introduced us, the infamous Koshi. But you know what's amazing is like I can't believe I have never met you before through the work we did with Landmark. I mean, how is it that like I didn't see you in the center or anything? It's so funny. It's just a small world.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, there are a lot of people that go through, and
Yeah.
so maybe
Yeah.
just but we have connected now.
We have connected now, and I'm so grateful that Koshi was like, you have got to meet this amazing human being, LeDerick, and learn about all the great work that he's doing in the area of disabilities. I love all the work that you're doing. I've been researching you a little bit, and we stand for something so similar, and that's around, helping there be acceptance of people with different disabilities, whether they're invisible disabilities, learning disabilities, whatever they are. We're a stand for there to be more compassion and understanding around that. So that immediately connected me to your work, being an advocate. So a little about the series real quick. I'm doing Michelle's Conversations That Matter because I want there to be more understanding out there. I want to inspire people, educate them, and even like just have them get comfortable with some of these uncomfortable topics. So having you here today to talk about disabilities is really important. I haven't talked about that with anyone yet. So, and I know a lot of people who have loved ones in their lives who have learning disabilities, and there are so many sensitivities around that, and there's so much education that we need to be doing around that to help create more understanding and compassion. So I'm babbling, so I'm going to stop babbling, and I'm going to invite you to introduce yourself. Tell everyone who you are, where you live, and what you do.
So I'm LeDerick Horn. I live in central New Jersey, Franklin Township, just north of Princeton, just south of New Brunswick. I am a poet, a performance poet, and I'm an advocate for people with disabilities. And I work primarily within the realm of education reform, special education. And I really think my mission in this world is about creating better outcomes for people with disabilities. So that's me. And I co-author of the book, Empowering Students with Hidden Disabilities, A Path to Pride and Success. And I get the honor of doing teacher in services, and speaking at conferences, and working directly with different departments of eds for states all over the country around different initiatives, all around empowering young people with disabilities.
Amazing. What was the pivotal moment for you that had you get connected to wanting to do more for this population?
Wow. So pivotal moment. I think for all of us, when we kind of look at our life's path, I don't know if there's ever just like one thing that happens,
Yeah.
I can say that one of the key pieces, and I think this also connects with the work that you do, is that when I was about 17 years old, after years of being in special education and years of feeling a lot of shame about how my mind worked and the challenges that I had in school, I had what I self-diagnosed as an emotional breakdown. And I really, at that moment, 17 years old, facing graduation, not knowing if I had the skills to go to college, not knowing if I would be able to get a career, I really should have been seeing a mental health professional. But I have, I've been described as a person with a lot of grit. And I have an awesome mom that listened to me sort of talk through a lot of the things that I was wrestling with at that moment. And I came out of that period sort of redefined and embraced the idea that I was a person with talents and skills that I could use to face the challenges in my life. And so that moment, I think, led me on a trajectory of eventually going to Middlesex County College and taking part in a disability support program there, and that opened up the world of education to me. And if I can think about another really key one, it would probably be so I spent 5 years at Middlesex and then went up to New Jersey City University. In my last semester there, Bill Freeman was this guy, works at the Department of Ed here in the state of New Jersey. He saw me speaking on a panel telling my story, and offered me an opportunity to speak at a conference. And then his colleague, Bob Hall, reached out to me afterwards and gave me an opportunity to work with the State Department of Education to do work around youth leadership for kids with disabilities. And so I give Bill Freeman and Bob Hall credit for discovering me. And they really gave me an opportunity to have a platform and to work on a larger level around impacting and empowering young people with disabilities.
Can you tell us a little bit about your struggle with disability, with your learning disability?
Sure. So I was diagnosed and given the label of being neurologically impaired when I was 9 years old. And so that's sort of an arcane diagnosis, but it was relatively common here in New Jersey, and particularly for boys and Black boys in New Jersey. And so my learning disability impairs my ability to spell, to read, as far as reading comprehension goes. So I read on about a 6th grade level. My ability to do mental math is impaired too, and I'm also very easily distracted. So those are some of the big ones. And then I would also say, combined with that, is also me carrying a lifetime of trauma associated with my experience going through school, of being in segregated classes, separate classes from everyone else, and just sort of having an educational experience that made me feel less than, particularly intellectually and as far as my abilities as a student. So but I'm a published writer. I have a degree in mathematics. I was able to do really well, and a lot of that was about me being open to help and using supports.
So we both did Landmark together. How did Landmark help you? I guess, like, what was the role of Landmark for you? And like, did it help you get connected to wanting to do more in the space?
Yeah, I think for me, Landmark just helped me to level up. I was already out here doing this sort of work, but it helped me to tap into power and resources I didn't know that I had. It also allowed me to, in a very loving and caring way, to sort of stop lying to myself, right? And start looking into places where I actually really needed to do some improvement. So, being more consistent, and showing up and doing what I say I'm going to do, and understanding my limitations, and then also just, being willing to play the game of life at a much larger level. And then, sort of cutting out things that weren't necessary, things that actually were not serving me. Mm-hmm. A lot of that came from my time in Landmark.
That's awesome. What's your favorite memory of Landmark? I mean, I don't know. Did you do the curriculum? So, like, what would your favorite, I guess, course be or experience be?
So, I think for me, it was so much of the sort of the aha moments came from me listening to other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just sitting there and just sort of realizing that I was wrestling with some similar challenges that other people have. And like, I can remember really directly, one of the things which is like so crucial is this thing about being on time, right? Showing up on time, and someone just sort of realizing that they had spent their entire life just sort of, and this is my mother's saying, half-assing it, right? So me just thinking like, man, I've been half-assing it too, like there's so much more that I can muster and put to bear to getting what I want out of life. And it was great to be able to do that in a communal way, and in a way that was very efficient. I mean, you cover so much ground in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, that work was absolutely life-changing for me. So I can relate. Why do you love to do the work that you do? You're doing such cool things between, your public speaking, your poetry. Like, why do you love what you do?
I think that initially there was a lot of motivation around wanting to be a sort of example that I didn't see growing up as a kid, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of my initial work was doing work directly with young people. And when I was young, going through school, and even as a young man, I just didn't see many examples of people who had disabilities. And, like I say that I am successful because of how my mind works, not in spite of, right?
Right.
And so I just didn't see that example. Now, I think as I've gotten older and I've been able to do more and more of this work, the motivation for me and what really kind of gets me excited is that I know that there is sort of a lot of change that has to be done, right? Particularly in the world of education. And there are great PhDs out there doing this work and people doing really great research. But I've just kind of figured out, and it took me a while to just kind of be very grounded in the space of being a poet, being a storyteller, being a person that understands the value of research and studies, but also I'm a person I think that can take a lot of that information and then sort of translate it to the everyday person, whether it be a parent, a student, or an educator out in the field. Mm-hmm. So being able to be a person that I think can be a bridge and to help inspire and inform people, is really great. And I've been doing this long enough now where every so often, on Instagram or Facebook, there's that young person that'll pop up that says, I saw you 10 years ago and you made a difference, or that educator that says, you were at this conference and you gave this keynote and it made me really think and start doing these things differently. And that feels really good. It makes me feel as if I'm really making a change.
I think we underestimate the power of lived experience, right? And the power of the impact we can have. I feel like, we could look at all the experts in the fields that we're in and say, there's not enough room for me, or we can say, there's a very unique place for me there and I can make a contribution. I struggle with that a little bit myself because I'm like you said, like there's researchers doing the work. Well, for me, like I'm not a clinician, but I have lived experience and I can be that bridge for someone else. And it's not a competing role, it's a different role. And there's a space for that. There's an opportunity for that. So just like you with your lived experience, you're creating a space for relatedness and helping people see it through your lens, which is equally valuable. So I applaud that because I think there's probably many more people out there who underestimate the power of their journey being a massive contribution because they feel they don't have some credential or some book knowledge behind them. So I want to invite people who might be hearing this to really reflect and say, what is it that you should be doing and how can you be making a bigger contribution in the world with your lived experience, regardless of what it is, because there's a place for you.
Yeah. And everyone who's, whether they become a politician or a business owner, or, some of that is all about like living your life and seeing problems and then deciding to take on the responsibility of trying to find solutions. And so there are a lot of really great stories that begin that way. And one of the things that I see quite a bit is people who maybe want to get involved in doing training or want to write that book or, or record that video or what have you. And there's just this like, I got to get this next thing, right? If I get this next certification or this next sheet of paper, or, this next thing. And so, and of course there's value in all of that, but many of us are ready now. Right? Like you've got what you need now. And one of the more powerful lessons that I've learned over life is that you begin where you are, right? I remember someone saying to me, giving me the advice that like, if you were a photographer, like, okay, maybe you're starting out, maybe you're not going to get into that exclusive gallery, but turn your garage into your gallery, or invite people to come in and walk around and look at your work, right? Or you jump on Instagram and that becomes your gallery, right?
Yeah.
And you begin where you are, and then the more passion and love you put into it, the larger it'll grow.
Yes, I love that. So why poetry, LeDerick? Why poetry? How is it that you gravitated to something like poetry, and how has it served you in your life?
So I I want to say that I've always been an artist. Like my parents can tell stories about, like, my father told me once that when I was really, really little, maybe even before I could talk, he came home and saw me just sort of drawing on the wall as a kid. And I've always been drawn to language, right? In my house, my family had this amazing record collection, and it's something I inherited. I have it downstairs in my library. But I remember very clearly my father playing like folk music and me just loving the stories and the way in which they were told. I think I stole his cassette of Hotel California at one point. And I have and one of the groups that made one of the biggest influences on me when I was younger were a sort of revolutionary Black poetry group called the Last Poets. So my mother had a copy of their album, and I still have that record. And she was over the house the other day and almost took it from me. So yeah, I think it was just always a love of language, and this was even at a time when I remember listening to this music and just being really, really connecting to it, listening to those words, connecting to it. And this was at a time when I was 9 years old and couldn't tell you what the alphabet was. I didn't understand it, but it was always a sound, right? And then there's storytelling. Like, my grandfather was the local president of the New Brunswick chapter of the NAACP during the heart of the Civil Rights Movement. And so I grew up in my grandparents' living room and hearing him and his fellow NAACP members talking, and strategizing and reminiscing over things that had happened. And my father was a coach, and the cross country coach, and coaches talk and they know how to motivate people. And so it was always this sort of love of language. But what really prevented me, I think, from being very expressive early on in life was a fear of not being able to spell. And so once I got to college, my counselor just said to me, LeDerick, stop worrying about the spelling and write. You just write, and we'll deal with the spelling later on. And the poetry just started pouring out of me. Nice. And so that I think it was always there. And I was very fortunate that I was able to connect with a great community of artists in New Brunswick. And that became like a home for me. And that was amazing, right? To be kind of known as a writer, even though I had spent all this time in my life struggling with reading and writing. And I think throughout my life, art has always been, for me, something that should serve a social good. And so my writing always sort of had that angle to it. I'm all for just like, love poems and talking about flowers and that kind of stuff. But I also think that our artwork should be out there to create change. And so, as I was learning how to write and, first kind of going out and stepping out into doing open mics, I was frequently exploring the two identities of being both a Black man and a person with a disability. And then once I graduated and got really firmly rooted in doing the work in the disability world, I said, this is what I'm going to write about. I want to be the poet for this community. I
love it. Yeah, I believe in expression like that. I mean, I'm an artist too, and there's nothing more exhilarating than being creative. So I can appreciate that. And I applaud and believe what you say about having art do something to improve the world around us. I mean, yeah, for sure. I love that. So when Koshi told me about you, so switching gears a little, when Koshi told me about you, he was like, oh, you gotta talk to this guy, LeDerick. He's amazing. He's doing great things in the world. He's a poet, blah, blah, blah. And Kenya, he's doing something amazing in Kenya. So tell us about what you're up to in Kenya and the difference that you're making there.
Yeah, so Kenya came about a really amazing educator, a lady named Nancy Munye. And Nancy and I were introduced on Facebook through a mutual friend. And she was telling me about this school that she had started. Basically, Nancy's story is that she's a mom who's got a kid with a learning disability, and her sister also had a son with a learning disability. And in Kenya, the stakes are really high in education. And like, as you progress through school, once you get to middle school, there's like an exit exam, and this is a national holiday. The whole country shuts down. And if you do not pass those exams, three-day long exam, if you don't pass it, your education ends. And so for many students with learning disabilities, they're not getting supports, not getting academic supports. For many of them, their education just stops when they're in the 8th grade. Wow. And so Nancy, to serve her son, to serve her nephew, mustered all of her know-how as an educator, and supported them. And her son was able to go on and get a degree. And then local families, once he left the house, were like, okay, you got an empty bedroom, take my kid. My kid's got a learning disability too. And so it's slowly built. And she built this school called the Rare Gem Talent School. And it's currently they're renting a motel, 2-level motel. First level is all classrooms. Second level is a boarding school for about 150 or so students. So I heard about Nancy, and we got to know each other online, and then she came out to the International Dyslexia Association's conference where I was doing a keynote at, and we got to know each other face to face. And she ended up actually staying here in New Jersey after that conference for a few months, and so we got to meet there. And I told her that I thought what she was doing was remarkable. I could tell that it was a real asset for people with hidden disabilities in the region. Mm-hmm. And there are actually families from outside of Kenya that are sending their kids there because there's just nothing like it. Mm-hmm. So, but because they're renting a space, she doesn't have much control. And so through working with her, I really helped her understand that there was value in her finding a piece of ground, building a proper school that could serve several hundred students. And so that's what we've been working at. So we're building out a website now, which should be done within, just before the holiday time. They're running a global giving campaign that is still up and running, where people can donate to support the school. And they've purchased their first piece of ground and have started construction on this school now. And so I'm doing all that I can to really be an ambassador for them. Looking into now starting a nonprofit, like a foundation, so that we can do fundraising here in the United States to help the work that they're doing over there. But, I don't know if people in the United States really appreciate how privileged we are, particularly around the realm of disability. We had many, many decades of people who, fought to lay the groundwork of laws and legislation, and then also shifting cultural norms to allow greater and greater access for people with disabilities. But in other parts of the world, we don't have that. Mm-hmm. UN is, within the past few decades has passed legislation that some nations have adopted, but we still don't have the same degree of understanding. And that's so much of what Nancy does. Is not only providing direct instruction for the students at her school, but also just building awareness about what dyslexia is, what autism is within the teachers throughout Kenya. So she does a lot of training around that awareness building. So I'm out here, beating the drum and doing what I can to support her work, because I think what she's doing is amazing. And if we can do a good job, sort of my big long-term thinking is that if this one school works really well, that maybe she has a model that can be replicated throughout the region.
I love it. That's incredible. The difference you'll make is huge. What do we need to know? So could you educate us a little bit about learning disabilities? Like, what's your message for people who maybe have no line of sight, but know it exists? Or what's your message for parents who have a child with learning disability? Like, what words of wisdom do you have to offer?
I think one of the big things is it's important to embrace it. I think there are a lot of families that are waiting, think something's going on with their kid, aren't really sure, and they wait to get the diagnosis, and they hold off on utilizing supports that are out there. And for so much of this, waiting actually does not help. What we know is early diagnosis, early support can make a huge difference for a young person's education and their life outcomes down the line. And I think it's also I one of the things I really push is that you're part of a really great club. Like I'm proud to be a person who's LD.
Yeah.
So many of my heroes and sheroes are people who are also people with disabilities, and particularly learning disabilities. One of the really like a fun statistic that maybe you'll appreciate as well is that there was a researcher in London, last name Logan, and Logan looked at her and her team. They looked at American entrepreneurs, and what she found was somewhere in the excess of about a third of American entrepreneurs are people with learning disabilities, learning challenges. And when you think about what it takes as a person who struggles in school to be successful, and translate that to entrepreneurial skills, right? So you got to be comfortable with failure, right? Resilience, right? Realizing that you may not have all the answers. And so like being able to rely on a team and the people around you, right? So much of entrepreneurship is building a great team.
Yeah.
And then also just sort of seeing the world slightly different, looking for opportunities where maybe other people don't see them. So yeah, like you're a part of a really great team, but so much of that is around being able to embrace this difference.
Right.
And we, unfortunately, the language isn't as evolved as I would like it to be, right? Sort of learning disability, I think, is a bit of a misnomer, because for many of us, there's actually almost nothing we can't learn if the information is presented the right way. Right. So all that parents and educators can do to make sure that we are identifying, the right way for that individual student to learn, the way which works best for them, is really key.
I guess my next question is really, what's a big misconception or a big misunderstanding about people with disabilities? Learning disabilities specifically.
Well, people with disabilities, we have the highest unemployment rate out of all people in America, right? And so I think some of that is just this sort of idea that we can't contribute, that we can't be of service to others. Some of this is around stigma that is very, very old, right? Very, very deep within our overall culture. And so, I think, one of the big ones is that we can contribute. We can do quite a bit, and particularly within our sort of new economy. You see more and more companies that are embracing the idea of hiring people with, and we talk about neurodiversity. So having a more neurodiverse workforce, right? Yeah. I was at a event at Landmark College, which is a school in Vermont that it's a very small school. I think they have about 500 students, and they specifically work with neurodiverse students. And they were doing a conference around employers, and there were some folks from, Fortune 500 companies there. They were talking about hiring students, some of which were on the autism spectrum, others with like ADHD and other disabilities. And they were talking about like the productivity gains, and how like for some of these folks that they were hiring, it was like having 2 employees, the amount of work these folks were getting done.
Wow.
Even folks with intellectual disabilities, they're the folks that really lean into hiring practices will oftentimes talk about, you have a much lower work-related injuries, right? Because they're not playing around. Like you're there, right. You're working, right? Like a lot of us get distracted with social stuff, and we want to do it. Like no. A lot of the people in my population, we just we happen to have that job. We're gonna show up. We're gonna do our job in a quality way. And then there are all these other things and stories that you'll hear about, people with different kind of disabilities who are able just to look at processes and functions and the layout of stores and retail areas and optimize it in a way that other people aren't. And so I think that's part of the gift that our population brings to the world. I think the more we can, as a general society, the more that we can embrace that, right? That like people with disabilities are part of the sort of creativity engine that is innate in the human race. Right. The more we embrace that, the more we can provide opportunities, I think the better off we'll all be. I think part of the reason I do this work is that I firmly believe And maybe when this all shakes out, we'll look at the labs that are working on the vaccine for the coronavirus. And, I'm willing to bet it's going to be a whole lot of people with disabilities who are responsible for making these breakthroughs and doing this work. And if you even look now throughout the creation of, the internet and mobile technology and things along those lines, if you really look at it, there are many, many people with disabilities who are responsible for some of the big breakthroughs that have allowed us to live the life we live today. And that'll continue, I think, throughout time.
That's great. That's great. And I think, I think with more and more organizations, really looking at diversity and inclusion and what does that really look like, it includes people of all abilities. So I'm optimistic that more employers are really understanding the true benefit of having that be diverse, of people with every ability. Can really add to the richness of their organization and their performance, as you just highlighted, right?
Yeah, and the one of the things that I don't think a lot of people really also appreciate is that, particularly within the education space, but I think it's true for employment as well. Inclusion is so valuable, right? And it's sort of a water that lifts all ships. In that you think, like, kind of going into this, there may be sort of a motivation to do this just to help people with disabilities and give them opportunities. But like in education, there's a lot of research that shows that when you start building a more inclusive educational environment, everybody does better. Right. Students without disabilities, it's a better work environment for the educators. Everyone performs better. Yeah. And I think part of this is because the line about who has a disability and who doesn't is actually very arbitrary, right? And I think all of us, if we are honest, can look at our lives, can look at the different areas in which we're asked to perform. And we all know that there are some areas that we do really, really well at. And there are probably some areas that, we don't do as well, or we would even say it's like below average, right? Yeah. And so whether you've got the label or not, I think all of us can benefit from supports, from a diverse way of being able to present information or hand information in, from just having a more supportive environment. And so, that's inclusion works.
If I was Oprah, I'd be screaming this nugget that you just said. You said inclusion is the water that lifts all ships.
Yeah.
I never heard that before, but that is like a golden nugget. I love that. That's so true, and very well said. You are a poet. Oof. So tell us what's next for you. I think you have some series coming out. I want people to know about. Tell us what you're up to.
Yeah, so I'm working on a video series now, a 6-part video series for parents and educators within the book that I co-authored, Empowering Students with Hidden Disabilities. We have a framework for disability identity development. And so this series is sort of an expansion of what I've done in talks and workshops over the course of my career, putting it all together in a way which I think is going to be really powerful to help give families and educators the tools to work with their young people so that they can accept who they are as people with disabilities, start being more open to utilizing supports, talking more openly with people, connecting with other people who have disabilities and finding value in that. And more than anything, my hope is that families and educators will work with young people and get them to a point where they're actually going to be able to say that they're proud to be people who have these differences.
So great. Yeah. When people can own, I think when young people can own who they are and know that they're perfect just the way they are, I think that's like the biggest gift we can give young people, is for them to just be whole and complete with who they are. And I love it. I love that that's what you're up to. I think
a lot of adults need that too. Just like the more we can accept who we are, and and
model it.
For me, the coolest people who live are the ones who are just real comfortable in their own skin.
Yeah.
And you can see it across the room. People like that just glow. Yeah. And so it's something that we all need to learn.
Yeah, I love it. So do you have a poem that you would like to share with everyone?
Yeah. So this year we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disability Act, the ADA. And So I wrote a poem to celebrate the ADA, but it's, it's kind of taking in a lot of what we're experiencing during 2020. Excuse me. And it's called Until Every Barrier Falls. All right. So here we go. This is for the ones who would not be trapped behind exclusion's shameful wall. And this is for the ones who will continue to push until every barrier falls. This is for every wounded warrior who came home and challenged our grateful nation to elevate its expectations. This is for the ones who blocked the buses, sat in the sit-ins, and crawled to the Capitol. This is for the protesters, the marchers, those adapt angels with wheelchair wings who troubled the waters of their time so that this generation might live in a more inclusive now. As I write this, all over America, monuments are falling, and only questions stand atop each empty pedestal. As I recite this, I hope an artist is listening and will respond with marble and bronze. But until then, Ed Roberts, Judy Heumann, this poem is for you. Let each line chase the light in your smile and trace the contours of your commitment. Let these words salute those dedicated to the ideals that equality sprouts from the branch of equity. Independence is the flower that grows from access, and freedom is rooted in the soil of advocacy. This is for the ones who've embraced the reality that humanity is both fragile and mighty. And when we ask for help, it is not a sign of weakness, but instead is an indication of our determination. However you navigate, it is legit. This is for those who read with their eyes, ears, and fingertips. This is for the minds that dance in details, and for the wide-eyed ones who remake the world with every thought they think. We are the river of innovation from which the whole world drinks. And who am I? I am a lover of words left heartbroken by every spelling test. In school, my desk was in a classroom at the end of the hall, so this poem is for me too. Within me is the meeting of two movements. I am Black and blue. My disability is hidden, and I am the descendant of those who could not hide. I am your neighbor, your countryman, one of the poets our nation has produced. And here is what I know to be true. This world is not enough. And if this here is what we call normal, I say, let's be different. Let us on this day celebrate every shape, every color, every way. Let our actions commemorate the array of our being. Build a future in service of the multitude, and let this century be the wilderness from which our better selves are born.
That was beautiful.
Amazing.
Amazing. You are amazing. Thank you so much, LeDerick. Thank you for all the work you're doing in the world. Thank you for joining me and giving me a little bit of your time today. And I hope people reach out to you through your website, which is at the bottom of the screen, and keep on keeping on. I admire you so much for the great work you're doing.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, if people like the poem, we put out a really great video. It's Until Every Barrier Falls. And then please reach out to me through the website. I have a newsletter there you can sign up for. I'd love to be a support. And thank you for the work you're doing and for giving me this opportunity to share with everyone.
You are so welcome, my friend. Have a good day, and let's definitely stay connected.
All right, take care.